In this video, we will learn the difference between the variables and literals. A variable is a named storage location in the computer's memory. Since it's stored in the memory, you can access it by its name at any point in the code. A literal is a value that is written into the code of a program. A literal serves a purpose where it's written in the code, since it can't be called anywhere else. Any program we will write will have a combination of both variables and literals. As you write code to solve a problem, you, the programmer, will decide how many variables you will need. For example, to calculate the hourly pay rate of an employee, given their hours worked and gross pay, we will need 3 variables. One for the rate, one for hours, and the third is for gross pay. When you deal with variables, you will need to perform 2 actions. The first is called the variable declaration. In this step, you declare a variable by telling the Java compiler that you intend to use a variable with a specific name and type. For example, I could define a variable called hours. Since it will hold the total number of hours worked, assuming whole hours, then it can be of type integer. Any variable you will use in your code must be declared. Why? From its definition, the named variable will be stored in the memory. To correctly manage the memory, the compiler needs everyone to declare their variables. This way, your variable can be allocated the appropriate size of the memory to be stored properly. So what happens if we ignore this part and try to use a variable that is not declared? Well, Java will not let you do that. It will give you a compile time error and your code will not compile. Once you declared your variable, now you can assign something to it. This means you can store something in the reserved memory for your variable. For example, we can say that we want to store 10 hours in the variable hours that we just declared. Let's have an example to understand these concepts better. This is a simple program that contains a variable and literals. The first non-comment line inside the main method, line 8, represents the variable declaration line. The variable name is hours, and the word int means that it's of type integer and will hold an integer value. A variable declaration is terminated with a semicolon. A semicolon is used to tell the compiler that this is the end of a Java statement. Line 9 represents the variable assignment line. The line reads as hours equals 10 followed by a semicolon. What that means is that the value 10 will be assigned to the variable hours. This way, in the memory location reserved and named hours will have the value 10 stored inside. Assignment statements are invisible. You don't see the action, and it won't print anything to the screen. Instead, the assignment and the memory modification will be done in the background. A common mistake for new programmers is to confuse the assignment statement. It's essential to know that the assignment is always the value to the right of the equal sign is assigned to the variable on the left of the equal sign. Instead of writing the variable declaration and the assignment in 2 separate statements, we can actually write them as a single statement as in line 12. This can help reduce the number of line codes and improve the readability of your code. In this code, we also have 2 literals. The first is an integer literal, used to assign the value 10 to the variable hours. The second is a string literal, which is part of the first print statement in line 16. Notice that these literals serve the purpose of the assignment or the print, but you can't call them somewhere else in the code. They are not attached to a name to do that, unlike the variables. We also have 2 print statements. The first takes a string literal as an argument and prints it. The second takes the variable name, which is hours, with no double quotation marks, as an argument to print its contents. So the literal will be printed as you see it, whereas the variable will print the content, which is the 10 stored in the variable hours in this case. Notice that both the literal and the variable will be printed on the same line, since we are using the print method with no new line escape character. Let's see how this will work on BlueJ. In this demo, we will learn the difference between the literals and variables. Here, I have a very simple program that has both variables and literals. For example, here I declare a variable called hours, and it's of type int. And then I assign a value to it, which is hours equal to 10, which puts 10 in hours. Now, one thing you need to learn is that you could actually do this in a single line. However, you cannot do both. You cannot redeclare a variable that you have declared before. Java will complain and give you compile time error. Usually, to see the error, hover over the error, and it's going to tell you what is going on. Variable hours is already defined because it was already defined here. All right. So if you want to do this, you would need to remove one of them. Now notice here that you can't use a variable before you declare it. So for example, here I cannot go and declare hours here and try to use it before it. It will say cannot find symbol variable hours. It cannot find variable hours. It's not declared. Java doesn't know about it. All right. And that's why you need to declare every single variable you are going to use in Java. Now we go to the printing statements. We have two statements that we can print. The first has the string literal, which says the number of hours is, and then a space here to make it readable, and then another print statement that prints hours. If I compile and run, it's going to print exactly what I wrote here. Notice here that for the string literal, it's going to be printed as is, whereas for a variable, it's going to print the contents of that variable. So for example, here, since we assigned 10 to hours, it's going to print 10. If I change this one here to be 20, compile and run, it will print 20. Notice here that you are responsible for the format. If I remove this space, it will just print this exactly as it sees it. So in this case, you are responsible of making this readable. Another thing you could do is that, for example, here to add the escape sequence new line. So this way you can print them into separate lines. Here's an interesting question. Can we print the string literal and the variable hours using a single print statement? The answer is yes. This can be done using the plus operator. Let's see how. In Java and many other programming languages, the plus operator can be used in two ways. The first is the most intuitive and straightforward way, which is to add two numbers. In this case, as you can see, adding 6 plus 5 inside the print line statement will treat 6 plus 5 as two numbers being added to each other. And this will result in printing 11 to the screen. The second use of the plus operator is to concatenate strings or strings with other items. If either side of the plus operator is a string, the result will be a string. For example, the string hello world can be divided into two strings, hello and word, then concatenated together using the plus operator. The two items do not have to be strings. If one of them is a string, concatenating anything with a string will turn the whole argument into a string. For example, a string can be concatenated with a numerical value like the 10 in this case. Or to answer our previous question, yes, we can concatenate the variable hours with the string to be printed using a single print statement. You can also add a escape character to the string. Notice that the characters use single quotations as in the \n here. So in general, why do we need the plus operator? Sometimes you will notice that some programmers flip one of their screens to be vertical and get more code real estate in the vertical direction. This is because as you write long programs, you will need to scroll up and down. As you program and focus on solving the problem, you don't want to scroll right and left to read a long line that doesn't fit the screen's width. So in general, it would help if you don't write very long code statements. But what if you have a long line that you need to print? In this case, you need to remember that you can't use enter to break a long string literal to span multiple lines. It's not gonna work and Java will give you compile time error. One way to solve this problem is to use the concatenation plus operator. So this way, you can have the long string broken into several shorter strings that can fit in the screen. You can also join strings with other data types to print a long informative string. Let's see how this works in BlueJ. In this demo, we will learn how to use the plus operator to concatenate items as we print them. Here I have variable hours, it's of type int, and it's assigned the value 10. If I go here, the first demo is going to show you how to add numbers. So if you have pure numbers added to each other in a print or print line statement, Java is going to treat this as adding two numbers. And in this case, if you run it, it's going to show you the value 11. Now, if one of the operands of the plus operator is a string, the whole thing will be switched to string. So for example here, if I say something like this, system.out.println hello plus word, and run this one, it's going to print hello world. Notice here that this new line came from this one, the separator, to make some space. So I could print it this way. Here we go. So for example here, I can combine a string with an integer literal. I could also combine a string with a variable. If I change this to be 100, I can also add a string to characters, which are of escape sequences. Notice here that escape sequence, since it's a character, you can actually print it as a character. In which case it will be treated as a character and it will go to a new line. Now, since a string is a sequence of characters, and \n or any other sequence or escape sequence can be actually combined with strings, you could also put it inside double quotes for a string. If it was a tab, now, what if we have a very long line that you want to print? In this case, you cannot break a line into multiple lines. So for example here, you cannot do something like this. Print that this line is too long and now it has spanned, and then hit enter. See here, Java is expecting this to end, a semicolon to terminate this line. It cannot understand what that is. And if you compile, it just complains and gives you an error, compile time error, it's not going to run. So what you want to do is to break this into multiple strings and print them by concatenation. So this way, I can end the first part here with double quotes, add a plus, and then go to the next line, start another string, plus another string, and keep doing this. Now it compiles and it's going to run. Now notice here that since they are all in the same print line statement, they are going to be printed on a single line, even though they are written on multiple lines in the Java code. You could also now combine strings, multiple strings actually, with other literals and other variables to print very useful information, which would be very helpful for the first few labs that we will learn. Now that we know what literals and variables are, the question is, how does that serve the object-oriented programming paradigm that we will focus on in this course? We know that a class, which is the blueprint of objects, consists of attributes and methods. Then where do the literals and variables fit? This is the design of an employee class and object. It can be used as a possible OOP solution for calculating the hourly pay rate for an employee, given the hours worked and the gross pay. The variables and literals will be used to represent the attributes in this solution. Storing the pay, hours, and rate are all variables. Some of them will be holding integers, for example, hours, and others will be holding numbers with decimal point. like the rate or the pay.